Hello, I'm Toycat and welcome back to the second channel video. It's very early in the morning right now, but I'm excited because I'm about to be going to Monaco. That's right, the world's second city-state. It's also the second smallest country in the world by land area, but it's also the richest country. How do all of those things exist side by side? Well, today I figured why not explain it with a travel video mixed with a geography video. Are you excited? I am. Let's go.
You are approaching the end of the escalator. Do not block surrounding areas.
Thank you. So in case you're curious as to why this is a travel vlog as well, it's because today I'm going to be flying with an airline that doesn't actually sell tickets. That's right, I really, like the airline thing. I want to fly as many as I can, and one of the ones that you literally cannot buy tickets for is Privateer, because they are mostly a business jet airline, which means if you want, you can lease out the entire plane. They're meant for like business travelers, leasing out an entire corporate fleet somewhere, but that's not something that describes me or describes most people. But yeah, if you want to fly them, there are occasionally opportunities, because sometimes airlines have, missing planes or they go for maintenance. Right now, British Airways has a particular, issue of that because of 787s, and that is a opportunity where you'll replace those planes with ones from Privateer. So Privateer is currently operating some few select British Airways routes, such as this crazy early 7:30 flight to Nice, which is the closest airport to Monaco, and I figured this would be kind of cool to, take their plane and to see what it's like in their, business jet, business class or whatever. It's meant to be a lot better because in Europe, when you buy a business class ticket, you don't really expect anything. You just expect, like, block middle seat or whatever. It's kind of like, you buy the space next to you if you want. But this is actually going to be like a full-on, the things you see in international flights, but within Europe. So it's the most expensive European ticket I've ever bought. It's £145, but still, for the opportunity to experience a brand new airline in its coolest class, I'm kind of looking forward to it. At least that's assuming it is operated by them. It's kind of one of those things where they don't guarantee it because it's seen as a bad thing, except it's really a big upgrade. So yeah, upgrade. It's sounding kind of cool to me, and I'm excited to go on this flight, I guess. Do you need it for the challenge? So allow me to give you a brief tour of the seat, because first of all, we have so much legroom. Even with my bag taking up most of the space, there's more legroom than I can do anything with here, which is always a nice thing. Then on the right, we've got some broken or just, turned off buttons, which should allow you to turn into a bed. They do not work right now, but there is still a cup holder. Also, there's a lot of space between the seat and the wall, which is always a nice thing. And finally, there's a TV screen, which again was also disabled, like the turning the seat into a bed thing. I guess that was to make the regional business class not too good and not too much better than what you get on an actual British Airways plane. But to kind of finish up here, let me show you the food, because I thought it looked wonderful. Also, when you're done with the food, the tray table goes in and out quite a lot more than you might expect. So yeah, all in all, pretty positive seat, pretty positive thing. Really cool that it's like a 2-2 layer, and pretty cool that there's an actual dedicated seat and part of the cabin for this thing. So I've just landed in what is known as the French Riviera. There's some soldiers walking past with guns, which is a mildly scary thing. So that flight was a really cool one as far as European flights go. Got to fly a brand new airline, one that most people, and really I guess most people never even want to fly, let alone get to fly, but it's kind of cool regardless. I will say though, within Europe, even no matter how I guess nice the seat is, that one obviously didn't have the seat actually functioning, the recline stuff, but obviously no matter how nice the seat is, I guess I kind of get that, like, for 2 hours, you don't really need anything. You just, the price is always going to be the most important thing, because not really much else matters, like as long as you're not in discomfort, you don't really need the comfort, which is why I pretty much never buy the European flight business class, just because it never is too much of an upgrade. Like, it's nice having breakfast on the plane, but you can already have it in the lounge. There's this weird thing where, like, if you do that, you get food thrown at you, like, non-stop, because it's, like, one of the few small differentiators they can give, and I guess, long story short, is it's not much of a differentiator, in my opinion. So I've already mentioned, right, that Monaco is such a small country, it's a city-state, that it literally cannot fit an airport. The city, the country, the Principality of Monaco is smaller than an airport that can fit in it, and interestingly, in much the same vein, the only train station here in Monaco, train station in Monaco, is actually right at the French-Monaco border, and it's operated entirely by the French. There is no real Monaco train service, there is just a French train service that stops at the outskirts of Monaco. That's right, back there is the border, like right, it's kind of an invisible border, but it's between France and Monaco. There's seamless integration because the two countries are very closely aligned, but just kind of drive home how small this country is from there, which is the border between Monaco and France. Let me show you the border between Monaco and the sea. You might think, oh, it's going to be some distance. No, it's there. You can literally, I could throw something if I was really good at throwing. I'm not that good at throwing, but someone could throw something all the way to the edge of the country. That is the size of Monaco, and it really has to be stated just how tiny, the second smallest country, and the smallest actual country, is on Earth. Anyway, let's get to the hotel, because interestingly enough, it's also really expensive to live and or stay here, and a good example of that is if you look at hotels in Monaco. The price of them, seems to be about 200 for even the lowest end you can find, and it goes up a lot higher than that if you're willing to, because it's Monaco, of course. But interestingly enough, where I'm staying is right here on the French-Monaco border. Literally, this building right here is in Monaco, this building right here is in France, but this building right here, which is in France, I'll show on the border, like on the Google Maps, because obviously there's no real-life markers, but literally the crossing into France saves you more than half on your hotel. So pretty good value, and it means that, interestingly enough, I'm staying in France to visit Monaco, which would seem ridiculous in any other country to stay outside the country to save money, but that's what we're doing here in Monaco, and someone will stop next to me, it seems. So another example of just the pure wealth of Monaco is the average quality of car you see around here, especially near the centre. You'll see how there's just a lot of Porsches, a lot of whatever else that even is. It's like a goldish looking car, a lot of Lamborghinis and a lot of Ferraris and whatever this car running at me right now is. Basically, you're going to see a lot average high quality of car, even though the city by all means could be walked around, and you can walk from one side to the other in not too long. Even the longest distance from one side, one diagonal side of the country to the other is at max 2 hours. It's a very easy to get around the city. It's one of the most convenient cities. If you want, you can also Lamborghini around it, and the reason you do that is to show off your wealth, and that's one of the things about the city that's kind of amazing. So this is the Casino Monte Carlo, by the way. It's one of the closest bits to the centre, I guess you could call, of the city, but it was fairly common to have states the size of Monaco existing. So what ended up happening is they got both Spain and France, again, they were under the sovereignty of Italy at the time, so both countries were like, we'll screw over Italy a little bit, sure, to recognise their independence, and that is how they became a country in roughly the 1600s. So how did they retain their country status for the last 400 years? Because like I said, even if you get your... Monaco's terrible for recording, there are so many of these bad movies, but how did they keep their independence for all of these years? And the simple answer to that question is they didn't quite, but... It was only because of a complex series of land swaps that Monaco managed to maintain its position as an independent country, as opposed to being gobbled up by a big one. Because what is the end of most small countries in Europe is when a bigger country, such as during the French Revolution, they decided, why don't we make Monaco a part of our country, which is a really TLDR-like simplified version. But basically, Monaco became a part of France. Although the Grimaldi family still owned the land, the country and the laws and the sovereignty was actually France's. And although that's where most countries come to their end, that's where it's like, oh, this is where this failed state stopped existing. The interesting thing about Monaco is they managed to keep going because of a fun series of land swaps that happened between Italy and between France. So the country, again, it became under France for a little bit until the Congress of Vienna, which was a little while later, at the start of the 19th century. Because the Congress of Vienna in 1815 was an attempt by the major European powers to effectively rebalance themselves so that war would be a lot less likely in Europe, because all of the powers would be counterbalanced against one another, and that war would be a lot more costly, a lot more expensive, and a lot less likely to be won. So by doing this, they basically just had a lot of men sit in a room redrawing maps, mostly at France's disadvantage, and one of these small decisions they made, a footnote of this Congress of Vienna, was that they made the Principality of Monaco, which had just re-established itself, they gave its sovereignty over to the Italians, but made it a protectorate, so it kept kind of its individual status while being a part of the Kingdom of Sardinia. And the Kingdom of Sardinia maintained Monaco as a protectorate until the Kingdom of Sardinia wanted to become part of Italy, because there was no Italian state at this point. Italy was just starting to have the ideas of unification. So as the Italian states wanted to merge, and as Sardinia wanted to guarantee this, one of the compromises that the future Italian merged state made, amongst having religion be guaranteed, having the popes
freedom and sovereignty be guaranteed, one of the compromises they made was giving back the surrounding areas of Nice and of Savoy. And given that they gave back Nice and Savoy in 1860, in 1861, France is like, so this Monaco thing that's just been left not there, how about we deal with that now too? And obviously in a lot of these situations, it'd just be the sort of thing where they have like a very small battle or something like that, again, just gobble it up. But the solution they had with Monaco was they signed a treaty guaranteeing their sovereignty, because again, before they were a protectorate, which was a bit more complex, and in exchange for recognizing them as a sovereign state, France got 95% of the then country's territory. The reason Monaco is the size that it is today is because 95% of it was taken by France. Admittedly, they paid for it. They gave 4 million francs, which is a lot of money at the time. But as well as agreeing to give up 95% of their country, they also had to agree to follow France's military aims, to basically let France deal with their military, because they didn't even have enough space for it to begin with. But still, France got 95% of their territory, and they got the ability to have this, remaining 5% follow them militarily, and all they had to do in exchange for that was guarantee the sovereignty and recognize the sovereignty of this very tiny little city.
Because from France's perspective, it was a very good deal to sign. They signed very good deals, the best deals, you could say. But no, the reason it was such a good deal to sign is because think of it this way. In exchange for taking 95% of the protectorate's territory, which, would have been a questionable thing to do otherwise, which they got for a very cheap price, they basically managed to cripple the remaining state. All they had to do is recognize it as sovereign, which, didn't really mean too much at the time, given that their actual foreign policy was going to be dictated by France. That's right, the foreign and defense policy of Monaco still is dictated by France. They have to go along with them because they don't have their military of their own. If they wanted to have a military of their own, could they stand up to France? Could they tell France no? They can't really. Basically, they exist as part of France in terms of some parts of the economy, and in terms of military, and in terms of defense, which at the time for France seemed like a very good deal to take 95% of it, incorporate that with 100% certainty, and then take the rest of it and take most of the powers away from it, while still maintain that they're the good guys. All they have to do is recognize a sovereign state. Except again, recognizing a sovereign state back when they did it, in the 19th century, not too big of a deal. But of course, right now, being a sovereign state is a very powerful thing. And it wasn't long after this treaty was signed, which guaranteed their sovereignty and their right to make their own laws, that they immediately started, let's say, taking advantage of it. But again, doing what you would do if you had the power to make your own laws in the city, because the city, the Monte Carlo casino, opened soon after as a health spa. Wait, I need to do air quotes. As a health spa. Because gambling was illegal in both France and Italy, and they saw a massive opportunity to be like, wait, we can make our own laws, we can make gambling legal, and then people can come into the city, and it's going to be a huge boost for us. And kind of the story of the economy of Monaco, the reason it's been such a successful country, kind of ties into using the fact that they're small and they're sovereign to their advantage time after time after again. The biggest example is the Monte Carlo, like you saw earlier, but it keeps on going. So since I love fun facts, let's just give you a couple of fun facts first, because I did mention earlier that there was a succession rule for the principality, for the prince, and that does actually mean that they still do have a monarch in 2018. Yes, there is still a Grimaldi family member, in fact, that is technically the Prince of Monaco. Just to clarify, the reason he's the prince is because it's a principality. The kind of stack ranking of I guess the medieval system, let's call it, is that there was principalities for smaller countries, let's call them, and then for bigger countries there's kingdoms with kings, and then for the mega countries there was empires with emperors. And yeah, it's also worth mentioning, so that's a fun fact, they have a prince still. He used to be an absolute monarch as well. He still has some power, but he used to be absolute. Crazy enough by itself. But then also they're in the middle of the Golden Banana. So the Golden Banana is a population zone. There's 3 big population centers in Europe where a lot of the not only the population but also the economic activity is. And it's worth mentioning that the Monaco is perfectly located in the middle of one of those. So Monaco is not only lucky in terms of all of these other factors that led to them still being a country and being one of the smallest countries, but also it's they're very, very fortunate in that they're perfectly located in the center of the Golden Bananas. But let's dive into it. Why does being a small country make them more successful as opposed to less successful? Because, they are more rich per capita than oil-rich nations, or, nations rich in liquefied natural gas, such as Qatar. They have $160,000 in GDP per capita. That's, gross domestic product per capita. Basically per person, there's that much wealth being generated in the country. How is that humanly possible? And basically this comes down to a couple of things. The first one is it's kind of a cheese statistic. So because the way you will calculate GDP per capita is you divide divide, the GDP, the gross domestic product, by the number of people that live there. However, Monaco is such a tiny country with only 38,000 people that can live here. I mean, the number's slowly going up, but because there are many more people that need to live here to provide many of the services and the mega yachts and all these different things, work with the different services, a lot of the people cannot afford to live here, so they live outside the country and they commute in. You actually see this a lot with any rich country where people will commute from, say, like France into Switzerland, Germany into Switzerland, from France in Belgium into Luxembourg. You see this with any rich country where people commute from outside the country into it, and this basically inflates their GDP per capita because of the population doubles during the day, and then the people leave during the night to go back to their homes in France. So technically speaking, although the value is generated here and some of that money is sent back, it means a lot more value is generated here than the people that officially live here. Even though people work here and they do all their value generation, let's call it their GDP, generation, they do it here. It still, they go back home and it doesn't count. So let's say that figure's inflated by some amount because some number of people don't live here. So still, let's say that it literally, half of that is the actual number. It's only $80,000 per capita as opposed to 160,000. Wow, what a poor country, right? But no, so even if you take, you literally half it, which isn't quite how you do the calculations, it's somewhere, between like 2/3-ish of that. So, let's just say though, it's 80,000. That's still a lot. How are they that rich per person? And the simple answer to this one is one people don't like. So again, all I'm going to be talking about here is how you make a economy successful, how you make a high GDP per capita number. It doesn't, we're not going to talk about the ethics of whether this is okay. We're not going to be talking about is GDP the right way to measure things? Because for now, let's just assume you want to get rich. How do you make your new country rich? And the answer to that question is you obviously, you make a small country. The reason small countries are more successful, the reason cities are more successful is because cities are where things are at. Most economies, especially in the Western world, the most successful economies are all service-based. Although there is, the exceptions of stuff like the oil-rich nations, they still, only do well because of that, huge amount of exports. The places within them that aren't exporting that do well are the cities. Cities are where all the value generation is at in the modern world because services are what need to be done, and services are most effectively done within cities. Again, in a primary sector economy, you need to have lots of people farming. Yeah, do lots of farming. In a secondary sector, you need to have, economy. You need to have lots of these port cities or the, factory, you gotta have these industrial areas like the Rust Belt or whatever. You need to have those in a secondary economy, but most people live in a tertiary economy, a service-based economy, and because of that, having a city, especially a very small city, is actually synergistic. It means not only is the whole country dedicated to the most profitable type of industry, but they don't have to subsidize the parts of the country that aren't. If you don't know, this is one of the most wildly controversial things that people believe for reasons that isn't quite true, but farming subsidies are a thing that we do because we don't want farmers to go out of business, and we want to have farmers in our country stay competitive. Sometimes you might argue food security, you might argue, the poor farmers, what are they going to do otherwise? But every single country, most countries, I should say, not every country, but the majority of countries subsidize their farmers some great amount, so they take some of their money from their cities and they use this to fund their farms, which again, you might argue is good because the food security or whatever, but it's not an economically sound move. It's not an economically good move to do. You're spending a lot of your country's, tax money on on these unsuccessful parts. Rather than having those people be dedicated to the thing that makes all the money, they're dedicated to a less efficient craft, and then some of the money that goes elsewhere is spent on that. Also, another thing that maybe we can all agree on is that military, even though, again, it keeps you safe, arguably, and that's a big argument in the modern world because we live in a very strange, 2018 world. But you got to bear in mind that the military is a big expense that you hope doesn't come in useful. Like when the US is spending 5% of its GDP all on defense, you don't get much of that back. You get some of it back. The military-industrial complex, it's a whole thing. But when you're spending huge amounts on defense, billions, in a lot of, in some cases, trillions on defense over time, that money doesn't usually come back. It's not a productive investment. It's kind of one that you feel like you need to have. Monaco not only is not allowed defense because it's using France's, but it doesn't need and couldn't have defenses. So they're spending no money on defense. They're spending no money on farming subsidies. They're spending no money none of their money on these things. Instead, what they have is policies to try and bring in more business, try and bring in more services, to try and bring in this new world of getting the most value they can. So that is why they have low business taxes. If you want to you want to start up a business here, it's very attractive. You want to pay the absurd prices for a property just so you can set up a business. If you want to live here, again, 0% income tax. Wow, that's great. Wouldn't 0% income tax be great? Instead of paying, so in the UK, for example, you pay 45% tax plus 2%, anything above 150,000 a year. It might be 140,000, but after that amount, you pay 47% tax. So if you earn 100 million euros, 47 million, or 46.7 million, but 47 million in tax, or you live here and it's 47 million euros cheaper. And it's entirely legal. You're just living in a place where your tax rate is 0% as opposed to 47%. And again, a lot of people find that unethical, but a part of me is like, well, I mean, isn't it? It's like they're entirely allowed to do that. Any sovereign state can lower their tax rates to whatever they feel like it is. And by, luring in all the people here, they bring in a lot of rich people. Rich people do a lot of spending, adds to that whole sort of thing. Every single aspect of the Monaco economy, it kind of makes sense that it's the richest country because every single aspect is basically optimized for that. Although there is, some social services that do some good things that maybe do cause some expense, like there is bus services around, etc. They don't need to worry about a lot of the big problems which most countries have to fund. Like for instance, like if you're a big city, you have to fund transport infrastructure to get people to the jobs to allow them to be productive. You have to do something about that. But Monaco, I mean, like realistically, they don't need to do anything. They have 6 bus lines. That's the extent of their public transport. There's no metro, there's no trams, and the bus lines, if I'm not mistaken, they run at almost, it's kind of like a neutral thing. There is no huge cost to Monaco, but what there is huge benefits and huge amounts of business being done here, whether legally or whether dubiously legally or whether entirely legally, and that is why there are so many millions here. That's why all this stuff's happening, because there's almost that network effect too. Once it's the richest country, if you want to go where all the rich people are at, this is where you go. If you want to compete with the guy who has a $250 million yacht, and you're like, I'm going to have the $500 million yacht. You come here, you have the biggest yacht, and you feel rich amongst the rich people. This is all the cars you've seen in the street earlier. It's not only just a sign of the wealth, it's also something to aspire to for some people. Again, basically, where most countries have a national identity, which is built on some form of nationality or some form of anything. The current the nation question is the big one in my head recently as to like what are modern countries defined as, and not very much is always the answer. But the crazy thing about Monaco is it seems to be their national thing is like, let's make some money. That's true of Singapore too. Like, although the people here in Monegasque, which is a weird Italian French kind of mixture or whatever, the reality is that's not what they care about. Like they they welcome in rich foreigners right in hand, and they make a lot of money, and that is how they are the richest country. Are the things they did to become the richest country worth it? Maybe not. Is this something? Had some wind noises back there. Is it something that any country can do? Maybe not. But just because we can't perfectly emulate Monaco's success, it doesn't mean that we can't learn from bits of it and maybe try to recreate bits for ourselves. The truth is, the modern world is not the same as the world from 100 or 200 years ago, whenever your country was formed. The truth is, things are changing, and one of the things that is just an immovable truth is that it's easier to move country. Whether like from a poorer country to a rich country, but also from richer countries to other richer countries, it's very easy. If you want to move country, it's a significantly easier thing to do. And the truth is that's just a fact of life. There's no real way to change that. What are you going to do? You're going to lock people into your country? That doesn't sound okay. No one's on board with that. So assuming you're not going to lock people into your country, you're not going to force them from leaving, which I believe the last country to try that was the Soviet Union. So, I mean, I'm not saying it's an unsuccessful idea, just saying, but unless you're going to force people not to leave your country, you have to give them reasons to stay in terms of tax. You need the successful people in your country. I thought it was a person, I guess it's just seagulls, but you need the successful people in your country. How do you get them there? Yeah, that's something you can work out for yourself. But I guess the simple answer, is not just like lower taxes, because of course you can only lower taxes so far. That's only a simple solution. But have taxes that don't feel as bad. Nobody feels good about income tax. Income tax is the worst thing. There's so many memes about like, looking at my paycheck and I was wondering where the government was working in those last 40 hours I was working this week. It's one of the worst types of tax because you tax behaviors you don't like as a way to encourage people to do behaviors you do like. But yet we have taxes like income tax, which are an absurdly high percentage purely for the purposes of raising revenue, but they feel bad. And if you have taxes that feel bad and people have either lower taxes or no tax in the case of Monaco, that's something you've got to consider. Like, you've got to be competitive in the world, not like, it'd be nice to be competitive, but literally you have to be. And then there's also the second thing to consider, which is, I guess, the political considerations and the problems of having a large country. So the simple answer to looking at Monaco's success is be like, let's all be small countries. Let's separate every big country into small ones. If London was a city-state, London would be a more successful city. I mean, assuming it had good terms with the rest of the UK. Same with any big city. Like, your country, for the most part, I know there's a few exceptions. I think the US actually, to some extent, there's some cities that are pretty poor performing. Same with Berlin and Germany. But most cities are well above the national average in terms of performance, in terms of the GDP that they bring. And the truth is, you can either, separate them down into smaller countries and city-states. That's not a very good one, assuming you want to keep territorial unity, which again, we all mostly want to do, you've got to work out how to not have these huge lumbering parts of the country that is being subsidized effectively by the rest, rather than having it be like this thing like, oh, we're doing, like right now, there are different parts of every country that are being subsidized for defense, for farming, for whatever reasons, but realistically, it's done to gain votes. You spread out wealth in a country to gain votes in the country where you're spreading the wealth, which is good in some ways. I feel like wealth spreading has some benefits, but you also have to kind of look at it again and say, well, I mean, but we also need to make sure we're still competitive in some ways, and we need to realize that we are just buying votes, and surely there should be more education saying, sure, in the same way that you can move from anywhere in a country to any other country, make it be like, yeah, but the easiest country to move in? The same country you live in. Move to a city, you'll earn double as much. Wouldn't that be nice? Wow, that'd be really great, wouldn't it? You can even live on the, rather than, I guess, there's this basic thing where a lot of people assume that where you live and where you were born is where you're going to live forever. And maybe for some people, maybe for a lot of people, that might be true, but the modern world is a lot more about movement. It's a lot more about people following, I guess, economic opportunities. At least that's what that's how cities work. At least they're absorbing people from the rest of the country, and I feel like we need to look at that model some more. Again, you can work out your own changes. You have to feel about them. But if you're thinking like, okay, I'd like to have a successful country that's growing its economy, being one of the best in the world, you have to work out something new. You can't have all these taxes that feel bad, while also significant uncompetitive taxes that make people feel very bad, while also taking a lot of the money from these areas, trying to spread it around in ways that aren't efficient. If you're going to spread, find more efficient ways to spread money, or don't spread money, or become tiny countries, or force people never to leave your country and go all Soviet Union on it, whichever one you prefer. That's where I want to end today's thoughts on that one. You can be successful just like Monaco, but it involves hard decisions. Every successful decision over history, to the transition in the first place from primary economies to secondary economies to economies based on services. The thing that made certain governments, whether it be like whatever you want to say, like the Thatcher government, for instance, it's not that whatever the right-wing policies you think that she did that was so great, it's not that. It's the fact that the transition in the economy, which sucked for a while, like moving all these people, there are some parts of the UK that haven't recovered, and that is a bad thing. That's not good. That shouldn't be celebrated. But that is part of what makes things successful. Focusing on the efficient parts, because there are efficient parts of any economy and there are not so efficient parts. I just realized, by the way, they have these little stumps here to keep the trees staying up. I don't know if I like that, or I think of it's like it's like a disabled tread now. But with that said, that's kind of the end of my thoughts on this. Geopolitics, Toy Cat Monaco edition. Maybe you can learn from Monaco, maybe you can't, maybe you disagree with me, maybe you think, the reason Monaco is really so successful is because of the farming land that they don't have, because they've got secret farms underground and the mole people, or maybe you have a real reason. I'd love to hear it, but for now, let's just go off a bit more Monaco. So just in case you weren't convinced already that Monaco is a real country, which you totally should have been, then here's the thing that really adds the authenticity. As you can see, they've got real royal guards guarding a real royal palace with a real royal prince living in there, I'd say here, some parts of the year. But yeah, it's kind of a cool thing. Obviously, these days, you don't need to guard the prince with cannons and with, etc. But it's kind of a cool thing regardless. It's in general, though, everything I've seen so far in Monaco has been super pretty. There's a random one of those train things going on there. Everything I've seen so far has been pretty pretty, and 2 thumbs up to that, I guess. Well, 1 thumb up on the video, because otherwise I'd drop the camera. So it's a legit cast and everything, got legit castle windows, but I have to ask one big question, both how and why did someone do that? Like it's such a nice setting, and then there's that perfectly lodged up there. How would you do it, and why would you do it? They're just 2 important questions I don't know the answer to. One of the weirdest things about Monaco is probably the outdoor escalators. I know these are in some cities around the world, but just seeing nice greenery park, got an escalator just in case you don't like the walk down some steps. It's kind of nice, I guess. Also, if you're a fan of achievement/completionism, you can visit 50% of all the McDonald's in Monaco just by walking past one by accident. Isn't that nice? So for your daily awkward Toy Cat IRL story, I was approached on the street by a random man who I assume was French, who might be Monegascan, might be an Italian, I don't even know at this point, but he came up to me and he's like, "Français?" and then said a lot of French words before I could even respond, and I'm like, "Oh no, English please, because I know some French words, but not enough to have a hurried conversation about it." And he's like, "Lost, need to find autobus station." And I'm like, "I don't know where the bus station is." And he assumes my issue is I don't know if there what autobus is. And I'm like, "I'll look it up on Google Maps for you though, because I want to help out this old man who seems to be lost at the top of the hill." So I look it up for him. It's not showing up with anything, at least not on my Google Maps, maybe because it's in English. And then the bus drives past and he's like, "That autobus, what is that in English?" And I'm like, "Oh, that's just bus in English." And he's like, like, just bus? No, I'm like, and I have to be there like, no, like, just bus. And he's like, just bus. No, bus. And he's like, just bus? No, bus. And we had this huge, like, it was this awkward thing of like, oh my god, like, I can't even tell someone the English word for the word bus without getting into this whole kerfuffle of like, oh god. But yeah, I had an awkward conversation trying to explain to a maybe Italian man, maybe Monegascan, who knows for sure, what the word bus was, and I figured I'd share that in this nice little Monacan alley. Monaco. Also ducks.
So I am, of course, back now in the UK, as you can tell, because I'm here in my office, and yeah, I really just wanted to kind of throw another thing at the end here, because I had a bunch more vlog clips, including a hotel review, but I figured let's keep things short because it's getting pretty long. So, long story short, Monaco was a really great experience. I really liked my time in the country. I thought it was one of the best countries, or I guess really best cities that I've been to, and I would wholeheartedly recommend it. And I was thinking about it because one of the easy criticisms you can lay is be like, well, it's a really great country if you're a rich person, right? But I worked it out. I spent about 12 euros in the country. I got some food, McDonald's funnily enough, but whole different story. I got a bottle of water for €1, and then I got a slush on the street because I was just kind of hot, and I was like, you know, a good cola slush would do it. It was a bad cola slush, so I would not recommend slushes on the street in Monaco. Felt very ripped off by that €3 purchase, but no, to keep things in kind of perspective here, I found my time to be just delightful, and that's, you know, not because I was doing these crazy wealthy things like I didn't gamble at the Monte Carlo. They had a black suit policy. I didn't, for instance, like get to go to the club where all the celebrities are going. I mean, again, I doubt they'd let me in, but like, you know, you get the point of all these sorts of things of like, oh yeah, so all these things sound like the reason you go there, but no, even though the city seems like it's built for the rich, it's also just a really interesting city. It feels warm, I mean, not only just physically speaking, but also nice and friendly. It's one of the safest countries on earth, so you don't feel like you're at risk at any point. You can just walk around and kind of admire the beauty of the city and the beauty of everything around it. It is, it's got probably the most beauty per square kilometer in the world, and I feel like for pretty much any statistic as far as like would I recommend it, I recommend it the most because you can see the entire country so fast. If you are just like trying to drive through or do a bus tour through or whatever, you can probably see all of it in half a day and be like, that was kind of nice, that's kind of done. And if you are ever visiting Europe and you're like, you know what, where should I go, I don't know, I'd wholeheartedly recommend the south of France. Seems to be one of the nicer bits of France, as someone who has been to parts of France I haven't necessarily liked so much, and also, you know, Monaco, really cool. And then if you just keep going past Monaco, you hit Italy in no time. So 3 countries, and 3 probably pretty nice countries, can wholeheartedly recommend it, in my opinion. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of make this at the end here to say, yeah, I like my time a lot, and would probably recommend you go to Monaco too, although this isn't sponsored by the Monaco Tourism Board. I don't even know if they're big enough to have a tourism board, but if you are a tourism board and you want me to say good things about your country, hit me up, yo, because I'm already saying them, apparently, and I'd like to get paid for this. So thank you very much for watching today's video. As always, I hope you learned something from it. If you disagree, and I'm sure some people do, I'd like to hear about that too. But just let me know 2 things. 1, your thoughts on all the small country stuff, but also let me know what you think about this kind of mixing of vlog and the cut thing with also the geography learning kind of video. Maybe you liked it, maybe you hate it, maybe you hate everything in the world, and this is your cry for attention. You let me know with a comment down below. But for now, also tell me on Reddit, because obviously we post the videos there. But for now, second channel, don't care. Goodbye.